My name is Suzanne Carter. I was 65 years old the afternoon everything began to fall apart, though at the time it felt like an ordinary day I would forget by dinner. I was sitting in a quiet neighborhood cafe with my son Daniel and his wife Olivia. The kind of place with chipped mugs, soft jazz playing too low to recognize, and sunlight resting on the tables like it had nowhere else to be. Daniel was talking about work. Olivia was scrolling through her phone, nodding without really listening. They had gone to the counter to pay the bill when a woman appeared beside my table. I did not hear her approach. One moment I was stirring my coffee. The next, she was there. She was in her early 50s, maybe older, with silver threaded through dark hair pulled tight at the nape of her neck. Her coat was buttoned despite the warmth inside the cafe. Her eyes met mine with the kind of urgency that makes your stomach tighten before your mind can explain why. Without asking, she placed a small blue box on the table. "You will need this tonight," she said. "Answer the call, no matter what." Before I could speak, before I could ask her name or why she was talking to me at all, she turned and walked out. Not rushed, not panicked, just gone. I slipped the box into my handbag just as Daniel and Olivia returned. I did not open it until I was home, standing alone in my kitchen with the door locked behind me. Inside the box was a phone. My husband Richard's phone. The same phone the police told me had vanished with him. The same phone I had mourned almost as much as the man himself. Richard Carter had been dead for 11 months. And his phone was ringing in my hands. Before that afternoon, I was just a widow trying to learn how to exist in a world that had quietly decided I was fragile. Richard and I had been married for 42 years. We raised our son on a piece of land that asked a lot of us and gave just enough back to make it worth it. When Richard disappeared, people said the usual things. At least he did not suffer. At least you had many good years. At least you are not alone. What they did not say was that losing a husband at my age does not make you invisible. It makes you manageable. After the funeral, after the empty coffin was lowered into the ground, people stopped asking what I wanted. They started telling me what was best for me. My doctor spoke slower. My neighbors checked in more often. And my son Daniel began to worry in ways that felt less like concern and more like supervision. Daniel started coming by without calling. Olivia organized my paperwork when I had not asked her to. They talked about safety, about responsibility, about how much space I really needed at my age. "You should think about simplifying," Olivia said once, smiling the way people do when they believe they are being kind. "A smaller place, something easier to manage." They never said the word burden, but it hovered in the room anyway. I learned to smile and nod. I learned to let them talk. Because when you push back too hard, people stop listening. And when you push back too late, people decide for you. What no one realized was that before I was a widow, before I was a mother, before I was 65 years old, I was a woman who had spent decades making hard decisions quietly. And I was about to remember exactly how to do that. That night, the house felt different. It was the same kitchen I had cooked in for decades, the same table Richard and I had argued over and laughed around, but something in the air felt tight, unsettled. I placed the blue box on the table and stared at it longer than I cared to admit, as if looking away might make it disappear. Inside was Richard's phone. I turned it over in my hands, tracing the worn edges of the case, the small crack near the corner from the day he dropped it fixing the porch light. The police had told me it was lost forever, sunk with him, gone. Yet when I pressed the power button, the screen lit up. The battery was full. The clock on the stove read 6:42 p.m. The woman's words echoed in my head. "You will need this tonight. Answer the call." I tried to distract myself. I made tea and forgot to drink it. I checked the locks twice. I sat down, stood up, paced, then sat again. Every sound felt louder than it should have been. At 11:14 p.m. I was standing in the kitchen, watching the second hand on the wall clock move. At 11:15 the phone rang. The sound cut through the silence like a blade, not a modern ringtone, Richard's old one. The song he refused to change because he said it reminded him of being young. My hands shook so badly I almost dropped the phone. Unknown caller. It rang again. I answered on the third ring. "Hello," I said, and my voice did not sound like my own. There was breathing on the other end, slow, controlled, familiar. Then the voice spoke. Suzanne. It was distorted, filtered, but unmistakable. It sounded like my husband. Do not trust Daniel, do not trust Olivia, do not trust the police. My heart began to pound so hard I thought I might pass out. Your life is in danger, the voice said. I opened my mouth to ask a question, to say his name, to beg for an explanation. The line went dead. I stood there long after the call ended, the phone pressed to my ear, my legs weak beneath me. Richard had been gone for 11 months. Buried without a body. And somehow, impossibly, he had just warned me that the people closest to me were not safe. The next morning, Daniel arrived without calling. I knew it was him before I opened the door. There was a particular rhythm to the way he knocked, firm but careful, like he was trying not to seem impatient. He was holding 2 coffees, the expensive kind he never bought unless he wanted something. I invited him in. We sat at the kitchen table where Richard used to read the paper every morning. Mom, Daniel said, wrapping his hands around his cup, we need to talk. Those words used to mean advice, now they sounded like a decision already made. He told me he was worried, about me being alone, about the land, about the cost of maintaining the property. He talked about winter storms, about repairs, about taxes. Everything he said made sense on the surface. Then he mentioned selling. Not directly, not at first, just a suggestion, a conversation, a possibility. There are developers looking in the area, he said carefully. Serious offers, you could be comfortable. Secure, you would not have to worry anymore. I told him I was not selling. His jaw tightened, just for a second. Olivia thinks you are being emotional, he said. She worries you are holding on because of Dad. That was the moment something shifted. They were not asking, they were preparing. Over the next few days, the pressure became constant. Olivia started sending me articles about downsizing. Daniel talked about legal options I did not ask about. They mentioned guardianship once, casually, like it was just another form of support families used when things became difficult. They spoke to me like I was fragile glass, like I could not be trusted with my own life. But what unsettled me most was not what they said. It was how urgently they said it. They wanted me out of the house, off the land, and they wanted it soon. That night, I lay awake listening to the old house settle around me, Richard's warning repeating in my head. Do not trust Daniel, do not trust Olivia. For the first time, I asked myself a question I had avoided since the call. What would my son gain if I left everything behind? I did not confront Daniel or Olivia after that. Instead, I did something Richard had always respected. I went looking for facts. I started in his old study, the small room at the back of the house where he used to keep receipts, manuals, and paperwork that did not fit anywhere else. At first, everything looked familiar: bank statements, insurance files, the deed to the property. Then I noticed what did not belong. An envelope tucked inside a folder marked utilities, a receipt for legal services, not a local firm, not the kind of attorney you hire to update a will or handle taxes. A criminal defense lawyer in New York. My heart sank. Richard and I did not keep secrets, at least that is what I had always believed. Yet here was proof that my husband had been meeting with a lawyer he never mentioned to me. I opened the laptop we had shared for years and searched our old email account, the one we used for household business, travel, bills, appointments. The search results appeared slowly, like they were reluctant to be seen. Emails about land surveys, messages discussing access points and boundaries, and one short exchange that made my hands go cold. A preliminary assessment of the property, a potential buyer, serious money. Dated just weeks before Richard disappeared. My husband had been investigating something, quietly, carefully, and whatever it was, he did not trust anyone enough to tell them, not even me. I sat back in the chair and tried to steady my breathing. Richard was not planning to leave me. He was not betraying our life. He was preparing. The cash withdrawals made sense now, the unexplained absences, the late nights in the barn. He had been gathering information, paying for help, protecting something he believed was dangerous. And suddenly his warning felt less impossible and more terrifying. If Richard had been hiding the truth to protect me, then the danger had not disappeared when he did. It had simply changed hands. The barn had always been a place of comfort to me. It smelled of old wood, oil, and seasons that had passed. Richard spent hours there fixing things that did not need fixing, simply because he liked the quiet. That night it felt different, heavy, watchful. The door was already open. A single lantern glowed inside, casting long shadows across the floor. And standing near Richard's old workbench was a man I had never seen before. He raised his hand slowly when he saw me, calm, measured. "My name is Ryan Cole," he said, "Federal Bureau of Investigation." I did not answer. I did not step closer either. He told me Richard had contacted the FBI nearly 2 years earlier. That my husband had discovered something on our land that did not belong there. Something hidden, organized, dangerous. There was a cave system beneath the property, old, natural, easy to conceal. My son Daniel had found it first. Ryan spoke gently, as if the words themselves might break me. Daniel had been allowing the space to be used for storage and transfers. Not alone, not by accident. It had started small: money, promises, pressure. Richard found out. He confronted Daniel, gave him time to stop, time to fix it. Instead, Daniel chose something else. Richard went to the FBI when he realized his own son would not walk away. He agreed to cooperate, to document everything, to help bring the operation down quietly. Ryan swallowed hard before he finished. They forced Richard's car off the road, made it look like an accident. The investigation was handled locally, closed quickly. I felt something inside me collapse, not loudly, not all at once, just a slow, irreversible breaking. I asked Ryan why he was telling me now. "Because they are running out of time," he said, "and so are you. Daniel and Olivia want you off the land. If you leave, they can destroy what Richard hid. If you stay, you are a liability." Ryan looked me in the eyes. "Richard believed you would know what to do when the truth found you." I stood there in the barn surrounded by the life I had built, realizing the greatest threat to my safety was the child I had raised. And for the first time I stopped being afraid. I became careful. Richard did not leave instructions the way movies make men do. There was no map, no letter taped under a drawer, no dramatic confession waiting to be found. There was only a sentence Ryan repeated quietly, as if he were afraid to disturb it. "Your husband believed you would recognize the place." That night, I walked the property alone. I passed the fence line Richard repaired every spring. The oak tree where Daniel carved his initials when he was 12. The path Richard and I used to take after dinner when we needed to talk without walls listening. And then I stopped. Behind the house, near the old rose bush I planted for my mother the year she died. Richard had helped me dig that hole. He joked that it was deep enough to hide anything important. At the time I laughed and told him he was being dramatic. I knelt in the dirt with my bare hands. The soil was cold, packed tight. My fingers ached as I dug, but I did not stop. I was not thinking about fear anymore. I was thinking about my husband, about the quiet way he loved, about how he always prepared, even when I did not see it. My knuckles scraped against something solid. Plastic. I pulled until the container came free, sealed tight and heavier than it looked. Footsteps crunched behind me. Daniel's voice cut through the dark. "Mom, what are you doing?" I stood up slowly, the box clutched to my chest. For a moment I saw the boy he used to be, the child who fell asleep in the back seat after long drives, the teenager who promised he would always take care of me. Then I saw the man who had chosen money over blood. I ran. I did not look back. I did not explain. I ran toward the tree line as flashlights swept across the yard. A car engine started nearby, headlights flared. A woman leaned out of the driver's seat. "Get in now." It was the woman from the café. Agent Laura Mitchell. As the car sped away, I opened the container with shaking hands. Inside were documents, a small drive, and Richard's handwriting on a folded note. The truth is buried. Not because it should stay hidden, but because he trusted me to unearth it when the time came. I did not go to the police after that night. I did not call Daniel. I did not confront Olivia. I did not warn anyone. Instead, I did exactly what they expected me to do. I became quiet. I missed calls. I delayed decisions. I told Olivia I was tired and overwhelmed. I told Daniel I needed time to think. I let my voice shake just enough to sound uncertain. Just enough to sound like a woman losing her grip. They relaxed. People who believe they are in control always do. Olivia began speaking more freely. She talked about paperwork, about attorneys, about how everything would be easier once the property was sold. Daniel stopped pretending this was about my safety and started talking about timelines. They believed I was cornered. What they did not know was that Agent Laura Mitchell and Agent Ryan Cole were already moving, quietly, carefully, watching communications, tracing money, building a case that did not rely on panic or force. All I had to do was stay in place and let them expose themselves. When Olivia suggested a meeting to discuss my options, I agreed. When Daniel asked me to bring the documents Richard left behind, I nodded. I let them believe I was ready to give up. Weakness makes people careless. They talked in my kitchen the way they always had, assuming I was too old, too tired, too broken to notice. They explained their plan without realizing it, who they had spoken to, how soon they needed the sale, what would happen if I refused. I listened. I remembered. And I waited. Revenge does not always look like anger. Sometimes it looks like patience. Sometimes it looks like letting people think they have already won. By the time they realized I was not the woman they thought I was, there was nowhere left for them to hide. The night everything ended was quiet. No shouting. No dramatic confrontation. Just the sound of cars pulling into the driveway one by one, their headlights cutting through the dark like lines being drawn under a long sentence. Daniel was sitting at the kitchen table when it happened. His hands were clasped together so tightly his knuckles had turned white. Olivia stood near the counter, phone in hand, still trying to control the situation even as it slipped away from her. Federal agents entered first, calm, direct, uninterested in explanations. Daniel looked at me then. Really looked at me, not as a responsibility or an obstacle, but as his mother. "Mom," he said softly, "I never meant for it to go this far." I did not raise my voice. I did not accuse him. I did not ask why. I told him the truth. "You made a choice, and so did I." Olivia tried to speak, to negotiate, to argue procedure and rights and misunderstandings. No one listened. People stop listening when the truth arrives with evidence behind it. Detective Nolan was arrested next. His face went gray as he realized there would be no quiet exit for him. No paperwork to hide behind. No badge to protect him. Daniel was led outside in handcuffs. He did not fight. He did not look back. I stood in the doorway and watched until the car disappeared down the road. Justice did not feel satisfying. It felt heavy. It felt like something had been taken from me permanently, and something else had been returned just in time. When the house was empty again, I sat at the kitchen table and placed my hands flat on the wood. The land was still mine. The truth was no longer buried. And for the first time since Richard disappeared, I could breathe without fear sitting in my chest. I stayed in the house that night. I did not pack a bag. I did not call anyone. I made a cup of tea and sat at the kitchen table until morning light crept in through the window, touching the same walls Richard and I had painted together years ago. By sunrise, everything had changed. The land was safe. The truth was in the hands of people who knew what to do with it, and the quiet pressure that had wrapped itself around my life for months was finally gone. In the weeks that followed, people asked me how I felt. Relieved, angry, broken, strong. The truth was simpler than that. I felt awake. At 65, I learned that strength is not about confrontation or volume. It is about clarity, about knowing when something is wrong and refusing to look away just to keep the peace. I learned that love does not excuse harm, that family does not mean silence, and that protecting yourself is not betrayal even when the people you protect yourself from share your blood. I kept the land. Not because it was valuable, but because it was honest. It held the truth of my life, my marriage, my mistakes, and my courage. I chose to rebuild it slowly, carefully, on my own terms. Richard once told me that the hardest kind of bravery is quiet, the kind no one applauds, the kind that simply keeps going. He was right. If you are watching this and something in your life feels wrong, trust that feeling. Ask the questions, set the boundary, take your time, but do not surrender your voice. And if you believe it is never too late to stand up for yourself, like this video. Share it with someone who needs it. And tell me in the comments what you would have done if you were in my place.